From the basement of the Hopheads Guide to the Galaxy world headquarters located in northern Colorado, this is the Hopheads Guide podcast. I'm Matt Reber.
I'm Brown Jake. If your buddy drinks a weed beer and burps in your face, is that considered a contact high? We'll answer that question and more on this episode of the Hopheads Guide podcast.
Hey there, Hopheads and Beer Geeks. Welcome to another episode of the Hopheads Guide podcast brought to you by Beerds by Nick. With me, as always, is the guy who hides his beers just like Easter eggs every day, Jake the Brown Guy.
Well, it's always good when you sit on a toilet and you go to get some toilet paper and the beer falls out.
Hey, I forgot I hid that there.
Hey, that's awesome. And then you find out it's an IPA that was made in 2019 or 2017.
2017. I really should have remembered that beer.
Oh, crap. But it's also awesome when it's a stout, a barrel-aged stout.
Well, it is 420, and it is Easter weekend.
Oh, yeah.
So there's going to be a lot of stoned little Easter bunnies out there this weekend.
Always. So what's wrong with the Catholic religion in 2018 and 2019 when Easter fell on April Fool's Day last year and then it falls after 420? So any brunch tomorrow is going to be packed, no matter what. So there are people are going to go eat for Easter next year.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't know why I'm so hungry.
Man, what time were our tickets at? What's brunch? Brunch is at 10 o'clock. Why do we have to go so late? I'm starving.
Man. Hopefully they have Doritos. Well, yeah. So speaking of 420. There's a lot of beers out there that have started to add different oils and hemp and I think there's even a couple that have actually started to add cannabis and actual THC to beers.
Whatever you do, don't drink it. I've had a THC liqueur. Yeah, I have bad trips from it, and I haven't drank it in 9 years.
Just don't do it.
I don't know if I ever shared this story on any episode. It was a disc golfing tournament that I went to with a buddy of mine, and it was on a hippie's little farm. The disc golf tournament was, and he shows up. We're camping there, and he shows up late at night, and he has this bottle, and I think, moonshine. You got to think anybody who owns, hippie probably makes some moonshine. So you got to be super excited. Dude, I love moonshine. I love to see what people come up with it. And he goes, all right, you only could have half a shot. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? I can handle some moonshine. So I take a half a shot. I'm like, this stuff is not clear at all. This guy it's kind of cloudy. So I take it. I'm like, it was sweet. It tasted like butterscotch. Come to find out, what he did was took Everclear and weed and soaked it in the Everclear. Nice. And then he mixed it with Bailey's to give it a different taste. I got so goddamn high off half of a shot of that stuff that I threw shit the next day. So now that when I heard people are breweries are starting to mess around with that, I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not having another episode of that.
Well, and it was straight up, a lot of times you get too much and you ingest it, you actually start to hallucinate.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did. I remember I was sitting right next to a campfire thinking the fire is talking to me and it's telling me run away, but I couldn't. So eventually at one point I had to pee and I'm like, that's it, I'm done. And that's the whole bad part. I took cases and cases of beer for we stayed the night before the tournament. We were going to stay the night of. And I was on my second beer and I took that shot and that was it. I didn't drink anything else the rest of the night.
I couldn't.
I was so afraid of the fire. It was telling me to run away. That even the next day, I didn't even stay that night. I was like, you know what? I'm done. I'm going home. I'm not even staying tonight. I'm going home. So I don't know. Like that frightens me a little bit. I mean, people are in for it, like because hops and weed are such a familiar family.
Yeah.
That I think that there's so much interest in it.
Yeah, there definitely is. I mean, Flying Dog in Maryland has a cannabis-infused beer they've been trying to release for a while. Lots of hemp beers have come out. Lots of breweries have attempted it, but there's so many regulatory issues with it that it's not just the TTB that has to get involved. Now you've got like tobacco and firearms and trying to get involved in it. So it's I don't know. I don't really want to try it. It doesn't taste like something. It doesn't seem like something I'm going to enjoy the taste of.
Until you get halfway through a beer and you're like, that has weed in it.
Yeah.
You're like, what? Oh no.
Well, I don't like ingesting it. Like I've tried edibles and I really don't like ingesting it. I don't like the way it makes me feel. Mm-hmm. I'd rather just smoke it. I mean, it's much more.
And that's what it was intended for. It's a plant like tobacco.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I'm against it. I've seen New Belgium did their hemper, which was, I think I smelt it and I was like, that actually just turned me off from the beer.
Yeah.
Dads and Dudes did a beer at GABF 3 or 4 years ago that sold out that everybody wanted to try, but by my understanding, it wasn't that good. Like, but it's one of those like pastry stouts. Like, we made a beer that tastes like a Snickers bar.
Right.
And everybody wants to try it now.
Yeah.
Now, if they can make a beer that as you drink it, it like tastes like weed or like you were smoking, and then after it tasted like Doritos.
Problem solved, man.
That's the kind of beer I want, because that's going to take away both cravings right there. Like, oh my God, this tastes like weed. Oh, the aftertaste of Doritos.
Yeah.
That's the perfect beer.
Well, CBC was just last week, 2 weeks ago, and that was one of the actual topics that they had a conversation about, was how the marijuana industry is actually cutting into the growth of craft beverages in general, just because there are a lot of people who, when they smoke, they don't necessarily like to drink, and vice versa.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a huge percentage of people who smoke marijuana who would much rather just be high and not be high and drunk.
Oh, yeah.
So that actually, the fact that it's being legalized is cutting into the small amount of growth that is being able to be maintained in craft beer.
And I could kind of see that, because I remember, I'm not going to hide it. I'm not running for president. I have smoked. But it's been such a long time that it's not like, my current workplace, I just don't do it. It was, frowned upon there, and I could get fired if I did. So I just stayed away from it, and I don't really, like, now I wouldn't try it again. I don't know why, but when I did smoke when I was in college, it wasn't like I'm going to smoke, and have a couple beers. It was pretty much, we're going to roll up a couple joints. We're going to watch a movie, and I'm going to drink. I have 3 Gatorades in the refrigerator.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm drinking tonight.
Right?
It wasn't that I wanted, it was, and we did the cigar and beer episode, and those went well. But for me, it was never a joint and a beer. I couldn't find that middle ground of like, oh yeah, this beer really goes well with, this dank weed that you could get over here. Yeah. So it never, I never could find, so it always was, we're going to smoke tonight or we're going to drink tonight. Yeah. It wasn't, let's mix both.
Yeah.
Or you just got to hit every once in a while you're drinking.
I'm not going to lie. There have been a few nights where I was just like, I'm getting fucked up. I don't care what direction it comes by. I'm going to try every angle possible. I'm going to smoke this joint.
If it doesn't fuck me up, I'm drinking this bottle of whiskey. If that doesn't fuck me up, I got a 6-pack in the refrigerator.
I will get fucked up tonight.
Somehow I'm getting fucked up.
And usually I succeeded.
I got a gram of cocaine hidden in this room. My last resort. If If I can find it, I'm gonna do it. But usually usually after 3 beers of that 6-pack, I'm done for.
I won't remember where it is.
I keep forgetting. I was like, I was gonna do something. I don't know. I'm too fucked up.
I don't remember what it was.
I'm too fucked up. But that's what I mean. When you're in your 20s, and that's what you did. It was you. You could kind of. But I remember just like, okay, I'm having a joint with my buddy, and then it was just like, no beer was taste well. So it was pretty much like I wanted orange Gatorade. That's the only thing. Like beer, like I always kept feeling dry mouth, so beer never really helped.
Yeah, cottonmouth is not a cure or beer is not a cure for cottonmouth by any means.
So I mean, I'd have a Gatorade after that joint, but then maybe I'd drink beer after that. But it was never. Oh, you know what? Would go really well with this? Some Juicy Bits. Yeah, Juicy Bits would go really good with this. I can't see it. I don't know if and that's the whole bad part with. I don't think it's a bad part, but with Great American Beer Festival being in Denver in Colorado, it has become an issue, and I brought this up to the people that run Great American Beer Festivals. Brewers come out here, and that's something they look forward to.
Right, yeah.
And we've had brewers I've volunteered for that have been stoned out of their mind.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, dude, you're supposed to help us, like, tell us about the beer. And they're just like, huh. I'm like, fuck, you're one of those. Can you do this after the festival?
Dude, we got way too high today.
You ever been to Great American Beer Festival? Yeah. Ever been to Great American Beer Festival? High.
On weed.
On weed? No, because it's a beer festival. It kind of suck. Now I watch How High, I fucking stone out of my mind, and it's the greatest movie ever. I can't see how Method Man and Redman did not win Oscars for their performance in How High.
It is probably one of the best high performances.
Oh yeah.
CBC next year is in San Antonio, and
nobody's going.
And I don't know. I mean, I think it'll be a pretty good place for it because the craft beer scene in Texas is growing much.
I mean, with Turning Point, Chester King, a lot of people a lot of breweries coming out of there that people are like, holy crap, you know?
Yeah. I it's fucked up. We've been waiting so long for it to come to our backyard, and neither one of us were able to go. So we totally missed out on it. But now I'm like, man, next year I'd love to slot out some time and go to San Antonio.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Freaking make a couple days out of it and check out CBC. But it's like, well, if I couldn't even do it when it was in my backyard, what are the chances that I'm going to be able to make that happen?
I know. It's if we could, I'd love to do it.
Yeah.
If they pay for our plane ticket and our hotel, I would definitely go next year.
Well, we've been wanting to road trip to Texas anyway. Maybe we make it an event if we do it.
Yeah, see how many other people that are going to want to go around here. We could call Mile High Craft Guy and see if you want to chip in on like a freaking. We'll rent a minivan.
Yeah.
Fill it up with craft beer, and we're going to Texas. Craft beer, marijuana. Get to the Pueblo and then get rid of the marijuana. But one of the things that has came up, and I didn't think this was a big of a deal, and we talked about it off the air with our buddy Nick from New Belgium, the hippie, and I didn't notice it was. So we got a lot of breweries that are canning, which is awesome because I think canning is the way to go. But when you have such a small batch run, doing printed labels is never, any can manufacturer, a small run is like, I think 250,000 cans.
Yeah.
So you're not going to do a batch of beer to fill all that up unless you're a bigger guy.
Yeah.
So doing a silver can, getting a silver can and doing a wrap or a shrink wrap around it, is usually the way to go.
Yeah, the paper labels and the shrink wrap are really the most popular.
Yeah. And because, you could buy tons of silver cans and just do different runs off. They could be whatever label you want.
Right.
Well, it comes to find out, the paper labels aren't. I haven't heard any issue about them. The plastic shrink wrap labels have been now causing current or little issues with the recycling people.
Right, and how they sort it.
Yeah, so I guess it looks for paper first, and then plastic next, and then it looks for aluminum. Well, aluminum cans have been getting kicked out with plastic because of those plastic wraps.
Right.
And it's causing a lot of recyclers a lot of issues to get that cleared up. So I didn't think it was that big of an issue, but Nico called me on it. I guess there's a group out at MIT that are looking to try to improve recycling, and they found out like this is going on pretty big.
And they're smart people.
Yeah, well,
MIT.
Oh, yeah.
They're at least like...
No celebrity bought their way into MIT. They have regulations. We don't have a yacht team. Badminton? What? Badminton team? You got a full ride scholarship on badminton. Yeah. And you're the only person on the team.
Squash.
So, yeah, so it is. So I'm going to put that on our listeners. If you probably don't, like I went through my cans in my little recycling bins.
Yeah.
And I was trying to do, Justin was like, hey, man, I just keep my cans separate. And I started doing that recently. And I went back through, and I didn't realize it was out of 10 cans that I did, 4 of them had shrink wrap labels on them. Mm-hmm. And some of those shrink wrap labels, you can't really tell until you like really get to it and then cut it off, and it just comes right off.
Yeah, they're on there pretty good sometimes.
So it's just one of those things that, I went back through and started cutting labels off, and I still haven't heard back from Nico. He was going to get back to me if that plastic wrap is actually recyclable. If you could still keep, the recycling, plastic part of it in your recycling. You would think
that you could at least recycle it with like your grocery bags and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's what he was thinking. You got to
basically cellophane.
Yeah, you got to keep it separate, and do large quantities of it. It's not like having a milk jug or a 2-liter bottle of plastic, and you just throw that in your recycling.
Yeah,
you got to have a group of those and keep them separate, and they'll could do a recycling to it. So I got to put out to listeners, if you're finding out you're coming around shrink wrap cans, be sure you cut that label off before you go and recycle it. And it's actually probably worth a lot more without anything on it. Nice freaking clear silver can.
Right. Yeah.
So, just kind of be aware out there. I didn't know. You said that the CBC we're trying something new.
Yeah, there was a company at the CBC that actually had a new plastic label that has the perforation on it, so that all you have to do is just peel the perforated strip off, and then the plastic wrap comes off with the can.
Sweet.
And I think that's a great idea because it creates an awareness, because people are going to notice that. They're going to be like, oh, what's this little zipper strip that's on the can? So it kind of creates an awareness around the fact that it is an issue, and it makes it really simple to peel those off, because cutting one of those plastic strips off can be really difficult. I mean, you got to get a knife under there and get it cut to peel it off.
Yeah.
I've actually been doing it for a while, because I drink a lot of Odd 13 that has those plastic shrink wraps on a lot of their cans, and knowing that it's an issue, I've just kind of been aware of it. I'm married to a hippie, so she makes me very aware of all these things.
It's like the plastic you have on that can is killing seals. What about this little 6-pack holder? Dead fish.
A lot of companies are going away from that as well. Oscar Blues recently announced that they're going away from those plastics and going to a carton.
Yeah.
So they're going to a cardboard carton as opposed to those plastic 6-pack holders. And
I know there's a brewery out in Florida that did almost like something made out of seaweed. So if it did eventually make it to the ocean, it like biodegrades and it becomes like fish food.
Really?
I'm serious. I'm serious. I read it somewhere. I could find it on our next episode. I'll have
and you can make sushi out of it.
Well, they said that they actually have just don't eat it. But if it says like it was biodegradable, and I was like, well, what if you forget it? Like, what if I'm hiding beers again, and I find it months later? Is it just be like, I thought I put 4 of those in here, and there's no holder.
Yeah.
Where did the holder go? And where did all these fish come from?
Well, and I don't know the exact stats, but a huge percentage of our plastic ends up back in the ocean.
Oh yeah.
And after going to Mexico, I definitely saw that because the beaches were so freaking cluttered with trash. And it wasn't trash that people was leaving behind.
Oh no.
It was trash that was coming up in the ocean. And so that also kind of made me take a step back and realize, all right, all this plastic is very convenient, but it is become an issue.
Oh yeah.
So it's definitely something to be aware of. And I want to say that Outer Range maybe has switched to cardboard.
I've seen that
4-pack holders.
The cardboard, yeah.
Instead of the plastic ones. And I think those are a great idea too because those are easily recyclable. So
the other
that was my version of recycling. Right there.
yeah, that's a contact tie right there. One other thing that came up, and I wanted to bring it up on our last episode, and I don't know if you came across this, is the 8-ounce can.
Yeah.
Okay. So I got a trade beer from a buddy out in Chicago, and I think this is a great idea. You have your whales out there. You have your barrel-aged stouts that come in a bomber bottle, and you get your one bottle, and they do allotment of one per person. Well, this brewery, and it was out in Chicago, had their bomber bottles, but people were like, well, that sucks because I really want to try it, but it's a 13%, and I kind of really want to sit on it.
Yeah.
So what they did was they did a little 8-ounce kicker with it. So they did 8-ounce cans, shrink wrap cans. That's when I was realizing, like, it's one of those I cut. 13-ounce in a little 8-ounce can, bourbon barrel aged. Same thing that they put in the bottle. So guys could take these home. Hey, try it right now. Drink that, and you could save the bottle for later.
That's a fantastic idea.
And I was like, holy shit, that is the greatest idea ever.
Yeah.
And then another, like, I was like, there's other breweries that's all they do. Like, their barrel-aged release program is all in little 8-ounce cans. And it's little 8-ounce cans, a little 13% 8-ounce can, because you pop open that bottle, you got nobody to share it with.
Right.
30% now,
and you've spent $30 on it.
And 22-ounce freaking, bottle, and you're like, holy shit, I got to drink all this 13% myself tonight. No, you got a little 8-ounce can,
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
That's a really good idea.
So I thought that was awesome. It was actually the beer was called Little Buddy.
We got a little buddy
here. So, and I'm telling you, it was fucking awesome. It was probably one of the best barrel-aged stouts I had in a long time. It just was really smooth. And coming out of a can, I thought it was great. But, it's not something I would have set on. It's like, if I got my bottle and I got the Little Buddy, I was going to I'm going to, put the Little Buddy in my refrigerator in a year from now. No.
Yeah.
It would have been something like, oh, you know what? When I have that one, oh man, I don't got to work tomorrow, or I had a bad day, breaking open the Little Buddy.
Yeah. So yeah. That's awesome. I think that more breweries need to do that because especially if you're somebody who sellers beer.
Oh yeah.
You always are wanting to try the beer first before you cellar it just to kind of get an idea of where it's at.
Yeah.
And that way, okay, these are some characteristics that I would like to see improve. Maybe cellaring would help. Or maybe you drink it and you go, you know what? Cellaring's not going to do anything to this beer. I'm just going to drink it now. Having a little 8-ounce pre-cellar tester is a pretty good idea.
Just got a little, hit to the market, Yeah. If Weldworks did that with all their beers, all their mini noches and barley wines, I think it would been awesome.
Yeah.
Because you get people that are like, oh, yeah, I got the newest mini noche cellar. And then you you start reading, oh my God, it's infected. I got to drink it now, Yeah. And so you're trying to find that good, because they only do single release, one per person.
Yeah.
So if you're lucky to get a trade or get one at a bottle share to try it out, you really don't know what's going on with that bottle.
Right. Yeah.
So with the Little Buddy, you're like, you know what? I'm going to put it in the fridge, and a month from now or 2 months from now, I'll pop it open. Give it 6 months, and that's probably the limit I'd give it. But at least it's that little point you're like, whoa, this is really good. You know what? That bottle share I'm going next week, I'm taking this with me. So.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. All right. Well, the real reason we are here today is
Besides
because
smoking weed?
besides smoking weed, is last week. I keep thinking it was 2 weeks ago, but it was just last week. Last week, I was able to sit down with Gordon Shuck, who is the co-founder and head brewer at Funkwerks Brewing.
Nice.
It was a great interview. I really enjoyed hanging out at Funkwerks that day and getting to know their whole crew. I've been going into that brewery for years now, and it was really interesting to chat with Gordon and chat with their team and really learn more intimately what Funkwerks was all about. And the interview I thought was really great. The video that I shot, we'll see how that comes out because we're still new to shooting video, and I'm still getting the hang of it and trying to figure out like angles and lighting and what's worth filming and what isn't, and so hopefully the video comes out really well too. But Gordon's interview was really good, and it was nice to hear kind of the background of Funkwerks and how he and his co-founder kind of came up with the idea, how they've gotten to where they are now, and what the future holds a little bit for Funkwerks.
That's sweet. Funkwerks has always been one of my, top breweries in Fort Collins, even though they do tend towards the sour side.
Yeah.
But I think I remember meeting Gordon at GABF. It was probably 2011 or 2012. They had a booth at GABF before they even opened. And the only reason I kind of noticed it was I worked right in that area. Fort Collins Brewery moved out of that building. They painted the building green. They put the big FW in it.
Yeah.
And I was at GABF, and I was like, hey, so you're a brewery? And he's like, yeah. I was like, oh, I work right down the block. I was like, when do you open? Oh, December, you should come on by. Here's our beer. And that was it. Like, it became my stop after work when I worked over in that area. It was great patio, open. Like, they have great summer beers. Hot weather, you want to be out on the patio getting, and then their stouts and their quads.
Yeah, they are a Belgian beer brewery, and they haven't really strayed from that. They do have a couple IPAs on tap right now, but those are very rare and few and far between.
Really rare.
And in fact, one of the beers that they had on tap was called Few and Far Between, just because they don't brew hoppy beers. And it's nice to have something that unique. And they used to be really sought after in it before they started distributing.
Mm-hmm.
And they still are highly sought after. The amount of beer that they brew out of that tiny little facility is mind-blowing to me.
Oh, yeah.
Because they very easily could expand.
Oh, yeah. There's
But
stuff around there
they're very smart about how they do their business and how they do expand. And Gordon kind of gets into that a little bit. They have everything just crammed into that tiny little place. It's insane. So here's our interview with Gordon Shuck, co-founder and head brewer with Funkwerks Brewing in Fort Collins, Colorado. Hey there, hopheads and beer geeks. Reber here to tell you about Beerds by Nick. Beerds by Nick makes all of the great products you need to get your beard looking great. Everything from beard wash, mustache wax, beard oil, beard combs, and even beard wipes. The beard wipes are hands down one of my favorite products, and you can only find them at Beerds by Nick. Go to beardsbynick.com, BEERDS, beardsbynick.com. Use the promo code GalaxyHops at checkout. Gordon, you opened the brewery in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? And what's the story behind Funkwerks?
Well, me and my business partner, Brad Lincoln, we went to Siebel Institute. I was coming from a home brewing background. I home brewed for probably about 5 years. Started competing. Really loved Saison and Belgian styles in general. So when I was competing, I started winning some medals. In 2007, I won the national homebrew competition with a Saison gold medal. So at that point, I was like, well, maybe I can do this professionally. So went to Siebel Institute, met Brad Lincoln. He was coming to it from a business side of things. He was a vice president of a company. He really knew a lot about business that I didn't. After Siebel, he kind of went to Key West. He wanted to start a lager brewery at that time, and I came to Colorado, started looking for a job, and trying to get my foot in the door was tough. So just on a whim, I worked on a business plan for about 15 minutes. Realized I knew nothing about business plans. But I called Brad up and wanted to pick his brain a little bit. And turns out he was changing his mind on the lager brewery and was looking for something to do and really liked the idea. So within a week, he flew out here. We crunched numbers, and we were kind of off and running together on this project. So,
wow.
That was 2009. We incorporated 2009, and we're up and running in 2010.
That's a quick turnaround.
Yeah.
I mean,
we lucked out. The building we're in right now, before that it was H.C. Burger and Fort Collins Brewery. Mm-hmm. So it was just lucky timing that Fort Collins Brewery had built a new building. We're moving out, and we just kind of moved in, bought a brew system, some fermenters, and really we're up and running relatively cheap compared to a lot of other breweries.
Yeah, it helps when you have the infrastructure there.
Yeah. And timing was perfect for us,
Yeah.
I think I've heard people say they've put $1 million into tenant improvements and equipment and stuff, and I think we were in for half of that initially. So,
what attracted you to the Saison style? I mean, you brewed them home brewing, and you've stuck with that throughout the years.
I really like Belgian styles in general. They're just so, they just have idiosyncrasies, and every brewery is different, and especially Saison, it's really hard to pin that style down. One may be sour, one may be hoppy, one's light, one's dark, and it just intrigued me. So it became one of those styles where I just kind of went back to it and try and really pare down to the essence of what are these brewers getting at, with the style. Yeah. We managed to kind of create our Saison kind of around the DuPont model, where we wanted to really pare it down to the bare essentials of ingredients, make a beer that's dry, crisp, interesting, a lot of esters and phenols in it, but no spices. It's a straight Saccharomyces strain. And we really just get a lot of flavor from the yeast.
Yeah. You've had a lot of beers that have won a lot of medals over the years and have been successful. Are any of those evolutions of that gold medal winning homebrew? Or
I've always threatened to break out that old recipe. That recipe from the homebrewing days. It was really a combination of two beers, Amagang Hennepin, which was my first Saison, and then New Belgium back in the, early 2000s. They did a Saison that was kind of a little drier. So I kind of morphed those two that I liked into one recipe,
right.
Trying to kind of emulate those two. But I've always threatened to kind of bring back that old recipe, but we never have. So
you still have it?
Oh yeah,
or is it just up in your head?
I keep I've kept records. Like when I first started home brewing, I'm an electrical engineer, so I really geek out with the technical aspects of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have all the spreadsheets of like the ingredients, what efficiencies I hit, and going back till 2000 and whatever.
Yeah.
Last 15 years or more. So
it's funny how home brewers, even at early stages, have that mentality of keeping copious notes of every little thing that happens on a brew day. I keep track of the weather. I keep track of of everything. I mean, for a long time, I even kept track of like what I ate for breakfast that day. Just that way, if it came out perfect, I'm very superstitious. So I'd be like, well, I ate a burrito that day, so today I have to eat a burrito
exactly.
too. Got to get the feel right.
I think brewers in general tend to be pretty obsessive compulsive people. It appeals to that obsessive compulsive.
It does. It really does. Yeah. What attracted you to craft beer? What attracted you to home brewing?
It's a nice blend of science and art, I think. Mm-hmm. Being an engineer, I really geeked out on the science part. I built my own system. It was automated with a PLC.
Wow.
So yeah, I basically would throw everything together in the morning, hit a button, and it completely did the mash on its own. And I kind of monitor it as it goes, but then come back, do the runoff, and boil. So I kind of liked that part of it. But then, there's that art to it. You kind of create a recipe, and through experience, you start kind of getting an idea of like how the flavors kind of will meld together and how to layer flavors and that kind of stuff. And there's no real definitive, formula for that. You just have to kind of get a feel for it.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that too.
Yeah. It's that's a good description, a blend of science and art, because there really is a lot of art behind it, and it's the creativity that is behind a lot of the beers that you guys make. It shows that artistic kind of vision to adding different flavors and combining different flavors. So, what beer that you've made over the years has been kind of a piece of that vision, that artistic side of it?
I think they all kind of are. Maybe Raspberry Provincial a little bit. But the way I go about like recipe formulation is I try to imagine the beer that I want to drink, and then I reverse engineer it, and come up with a recipe. When we first started doing the Provincial line, people were just starting to learn about kettle mashing or kettle souring and that kind of stuff. So it was really like just going out on a limb. I remember the first time I did a kettle sour, I was like, well, I may be dumping this down the drain, but I got to try this because it just sounds so intriguing. And that was 2012. And yeah, we just kind of saw what we got, kind of worked the recipe to trying to get that vision of an easy drinking sour beer. That wasn't funky. A lot of kettle sours, you kind of get a lot of funk. So we honed our process to try and achieve our goals there. That was probably the most fun recipe, and it took us a long time. It took us at least a year or so to come up with the technical things we needed to kind of get a really nice, clean sour.
Yeah, it's did the first one come out? Did you dump it?
First one worked out. Second one, not so much. Which is probably good, because if the first one didn't turn out, we probably would have continued.
Oh, okay. You get cocky on the second one a little bit.
I don't know. It took us a while to kind of figure out some things. Pitch rate on lactobacillus is very. It's kind of. It's not like yeast where you can do a cell count, so it's very amorphous. A lot of things we learned was to try and control the fermentation with the lactobacillus. So instead of doing it in a kettle, we started doing it in a fermenter. That way you can really control the environment. make sure we had a pure pitch. We tried different lactobacillus strains, decided on Del Brucchi because we really liked the clean sour. But yeah, it took a year to kind of all these things to kind of evolve and figure out how to do it and do it repeatedly.
Yeah, and when there, at the time, there's not a whole lot of people doing it. So who do you bounce ideas off?
Exactly.
And now everybody's got it.
I know.
It seems
yeah.
like so.
It's one of those things that are really taken off, and I think it's really helping the sour category in general. I think approachable sours really is a gateway beer for some of the more interesting barrel stuff that people are doing. So.
Yeah. Now, are you guys doing any type of barrel program, or are you still pretty much strictly kettle sours?
No, we started a barrel programming before we did kettle sours.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, we started doing so back when we were kind of getting the brewery up and running. I was making a bunch of sour browns, Obrun style beers, kind of homebrew size, kind of getting our recipe down for that. So within the first few years, we started our sour brown program in barrels. First release, we had 6 barrels. We tasted them all. They tasted all okay, so we released all 6 barrels. Next year, we had more than double that. I think now we're up to like 200 or 300 barrels, and a majority of those are the sour brown. So
that's right. You won an award recently for that.
Yeah, last year we won a World Beer Cup gold medal.
That's right.
with our Ode Brewing. So it took us 6 years or more to kind of get that to where we have enough barrels to blend. We know exactly what we want in that beer, and then kind of blend towards our vision of that. So the first release was kind of like, well, we don't have anything else to blend. We just released that. So yeah, now we can actually tailor the beer exactly kind of what we want, and it's been a challenge to kind of learn the blending side of things. But yeah,
getting the palate to what you want it to be.
Yeah, and realizing how the flavors come together. I approach it a little, like an engineer, where I'm kind of rating it on various things, and then I take an average. If we have 12 barrels, I'll average those 12 barrels over those ratings, and we have a certain number we're trying to hit for certain things, like how sour or the aroma. Do we have enough of that kind of cherry aroma in there? So whenever you're kind of blending barrels, you're trying to kind of see, okay, the oldest ones are usually that sweet spot, 2 to 3 years. You have a nice sourness. You have the cherry aromas coming in, and then you're kind of looking at it and being like, okay, what does it need? Is the aroma lacking? So you're trying to find barrels that are younger that have great aroma, but maybe not as much sourness. Is the sourness too much? You're trying to tone it down a little bit.
Right.
So yeah, that's been a learning process over the last few years.
Are there certain barrels that have like a characteristic that's the type of barrel that you want for that beer? I mean,
the year we won, last year when we won at World Beer Cup, that blend was so easy. I knew I wanted 12 to 14 barrels to do the blend. We went to the oldest barrels, the oldest 6 barrels, and they tasted fantastic. Like, it couldn't be better. If we were going to do a 6-barrel release, that would have been it.
Yeah.
And then it was easy. We just found some that kind of complemented or kind of blended in well and came together.
Yeah.
Following year, it was completely different. The oldest barrels were not even remotely ready. So now we're kind of like working with younger barrels and trying to kind of mimic what we wanted to do, which was much tougher.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting with barrels because you never know what they went through before you got them, and what characteristics they got by transport or whatever their life was before you got them. So it's almost impossible to duplicate that, right? I mean,
Exactly.
Yeah, that's. I think that's kind of the fun behind sour beers and barrel programs.
Fun and frustrating. You want them all to be perfect,
right? Yeah,
it ain't gonna happen. So yeah, if there's off flavors, you dump them. You can't really blend that kind of stuff out. And then the blending is just kind of trying to come to a nice place on aroma and sourness that you want.
Do you have a barrel that you've kept around that you're just like, that guy, he's never going anywhere?
I've never really tracked them. Honestly, like when they're good, I'm like, yay, they're good. And then we'll make another batch and it'll go back into the lot, and we
so
kind
they don't
of forget
have names
about
like
it.
Pets or
No, like PH1, that was that New Belgium. No, we don't. Yeah, I should probably monitor that a little better than I do.
So you, it was in 2017. You partnered up with 21st Amendment and Brooklyn Brewing, and that just kind of made a huge boom in your distribution and your expansion. Can you talk a little bit about where that came from and how that developed?
So, me and my business partner Brad, we really did this on our own dime. Both of us sold houses and moved to Fort Collins to start this brewery. No outside investors whatsoever. But after 7 years, we realized we've incrementally grown to the point where all of a sudden that next jump was very expensive. We needed a new bottling line. Our kegging was basically hand kegging stuff. We needed a kegging machine. We wanted a centrifuge. We wanted quality control. We wanted a lab. We really need a new building. We haven't quite gotten that yet, but so it really got to the point where it was like this huge jump, and neither of us really had the money or wanted to really take on that debt. So we started kind of putting out feelers. Talked to probably 5 or 6 different people are interested, and then the Brooklyn deal came through, and it just made a lot of sense. A lot of people are looking to buy you out over time, take control of everything, and with Brooklyn, they are really hands off. They were willing to give us money to expand in the quality areas we wanted to. Yet me and Brad are still majority owners, so we make the decisions, and it hasn't affected that anyway. So really, the gist of the deal was to get sales together, distribution, basically streamline the distribution channels going out to consumers. And we've, as a small brewery, never really had that many salespeople to begin with. We were always fighting to try and, get people on the ground. So for us, that was huge. And having 3 different breweries with 3 different focuses really is a lot of variety for the salespeople now. They can go into accounts they may not have been able to go into. So it's really worked out great. Yeah, I think we're launching 5 states, at least 5 states this year.
Wow.
So yeah, it's crazy.
And you're already in 13?
We're like 12 or 13.
12 or 13,
yeah.
And just released Kentucky and Ohio last month,
And
right?
Illinois.
And Illinois.
And Brad's in New York right now.
Wow.
And New Jersey next month.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Huge. And, do you get to just call Garrett Oliver whenever you want?
I got his email and text number. Yeah. He is just like, he's such an interesting character.
Yeah, he is.
I never know like where he is or what he is. He just appears and, takes over the room when you're with Garrett. So
it's not a bad person to be able to contact.
Exactly.
I mean,
and such knowledge, he's been in this industry, 30 years, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, it's incredible. His books that he's written are some of my favorite.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's
one of the first books I got was Brewmaster's Table.
Yeah.
And I remember reading about saisons and how he called saisons promiscuous. It was like, yeah, I want to make promiscuous beer.
So that that's kind of helped you evolve and get the things that you needed to grow. What has brought a change in the brewing process from that? I mean,
Centrifuge was huge. Saison yeast, they're not very flocculent. So we're constantly trying to drop yeast out of fermenters and brights, and eventually, some of it gets into packaging. And yeast is great. It'll take up the oxygen, which is good for keeping your DO down. But the problem is too much yeast can start to give off flavors, especially as the beer ages. You're going to get that autolysis. So centrifuge was huge. And we kind of, it also changed the mouthfeel of the beer a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So we've kind of had to work the recipe a little bit to try and get back a little bit of the mouthfeel that you used to have. So we're kind of using some oats nowadays. So that was a big change. Bottling line, now we have rotary filler, much lower DO, so our shelf life is much better than it used to be. Kegging machine, we're able to steam sanitize rather than use chemicals. I never really liked chemicals, even though they claim, they don't add any flavors or whatever. Steam is so innocuous, I like it. And it's effective, super effective.
Yeah.
So those are big changes that have really improved the quality.
With that expansion and moving to more states and introducing more people to Funkwerks, I mean, I used to use Funkwerks as trade bait because I had it right here and I knew people wanted the beer. And now that it's grown, people I trade with are like, well, I can get that now. So you've affected my trade.
Sorry about that. The good news is, most of the beer going out now is our core four, which is Saison, Tropic King, Raspberry Provincial, and our new white beer. We'll do some specialty stuff here and there, but there's still a lot of trade bait, here in the tap room that you can get people with.
Yeah, your deals that you do on Tuesday is always, I'm like, okay, one for me, one for the guy I trade with, so it helps out. With that, you have kept a real connection with Fort Collins. There's always something special for the people here in Fort Collins. How do you maintain that? How do you keep that connection to your roots while still trying to expand to a bigger market?
Well, I don't know.
It's a tough balance.
Yeah, it is a balance. I think we've been here in Fort Collins for 10 years now. A lot of those years, when people couldn't get our beer in other states, they'd actually come here to the brewery. So it really helped kind of build the brand in a way that we could really tell our own story to a lot of people. And now that we're in those states, we're seeing a lot more people who have experience with Funkwerks already, which is kind of nice. It's harder to go into a state blind where they don't know anything because there's a huge amount of education. But lucky for us, people have heard of us. They may have visited a brewery, so there's a lot more goodwill there to kind of bring them into the brand. But yeah, we the tap room is really ground zero for us, and we like to kind of do new things, keep it interesting for the locals, have a good environment here for people to just kind of hang out. So that's the most fun, and that's where I see people enjoying your beer, and that's the most rewarding thing for sure.
Yeah, you have a very educated customer base here in Fort Collins.
Oh yeah,
and it's so it's got to be fun to make beers for that type of person.
Oh yeah,
who is excited about it.
Yep. New Belgium and Odell's have done a great job, back 20 years ago or so, really breaking the ground, getting people into craft beer. We wouldn't be able to do what we're doing without them really doing it first, and they really, really opened the doors for us.
Right. Yeah. With that, there also is a new type of drinker that's kind of jumped into the market who has been introduced to craft beer through probably beers that you don't want to make. The hazy IPAs and the stouts. I mean, how do you reach out to that type of drinker that's come into the market through a style of beer that you just don't even mess with, you don't even touch? I mean,
yeah, people couldn't believe we went probably 8 or 9 years before we made our first IPA.
Right.
I think we just trying to be true to like what we want to do. I never wanted to be chasing the next big thing, because that's a losing game, I think. If you can do it well, that's one thing. I think Weltworks has done a great job with the hazy IPAs. I mean, they're really at the forefront. But the problem is, if you're chasing the next big thing, you're not really standing for anything. So I really wanted to make sure that we hung our hat on Saison. That's those style that we really wanted to do well, and not try and chase where consumer trends are going, because it's going to be something new next year. I guarantee it.
There will be, yeah. I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be something with lots of adjuncts in it.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
which is fine. I mean, that really keeps things interesting. But at the end of the day, I really want to make a beer that when someone's looking at 100 choices, they go, Funkwerks Saison, it's always, the beer I want to drink, and, choose our beer. Something balanced, something not over the top. So
yeah, that's why I'm a fan of the Belgian styles as well, and that's one of the things that has always attracted me to Funkwerks. Is it's always well made and well balanced without any fluff to make, or sweetness, or something that makes other people want to drink it.
It's a hard balance to maintain. We want it to be interesting, but we don't want to really have anything that sticks out in any way. It's finding that balance, but also having a beer that's interesting. Yeah.
And as with any trends, they're evolutionary, and eventually it's going to come back around where people are going to get tired of all the adjuncts and want to come back to just a well-made beer.
Yeah.
I mean, and want to appreciate beer for what it is.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's happening simultaneously with all the other things going on. You look at craft lagers now. That's a fast-growing segment. People, I think, have tried just everything under the sun and just want to come back to just beer, something well-made and simple. You know. So.
And maybe along with that, your Argentinian hippie pants will come back.
Exactly. I wish I kept them around.
So you mentioned briefly the other states that are coming up later this year, and the need of new space. You guys have really made the most out of this space. This tiny little building.
Yeah. We packed everything in this last growth spurt. So yeah, that's it. 10,000 barrels out of this space is about all we can handle.
Yeah.
So we need to figure out what the next move is.
So there's the wheels are turning, but there's nothing solid yet.
There's a lot of things up in the air. I think the way the market is right now, everyone's trying to figure out if there's going to be a crash. Is this a slow deflating bubble? If we can sustain 4% growth, which is what we've done the last 2 years in craft beer, I think that's probably going to be the new normal, which is good. If we saw it drop below and craft, retracts and everyone's fighting for less shelf space, that would be really bad. So yeah, we're just trying to figure out if it makes sense. Do we build that $5 to $10 million facility and take that next leap? Can we hang out where we are right now and see where things go?
The laws in Colorado with the changes that happened at the beginning of the year, have you seen any benefits or downfalls to the grocery stores now being able to carry your products, or Has it just kind of been stagnant? I mean,
It's kind of too. I'm not on that end. I'm more on the production side than the sales side. So I wouldn't be the best person to ask. But I haven't noticed anything drastic change. For us, it helped. Now that we're aligned with Brooklyn and 21st Amendment, we actually have infrastructure to, sell to chain stores and do that. I think the changes are probably going to hurt the smaller guys for sure.
Yeah.
And that's a sad thing about it.
Yeah. And I think the small liquor stores are gonna feel it as well.
Yeah.
I think that's and those have really been the bread and butter for craft over the years.
Yep.
Those little guys that are have shelf space for your product.
Yep. I remember when we first opened, taking a truck full of beer and going around town and selling it. Pretty much handshake deals. It's really nice to do business that way.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, my hope is that the smaller liquor stores will be able to maybe go high end, maybe be able to offer things that a grocery store wouldn't. Something a little more rare, a little more pricey. And that they can kind of carve out a niche there, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I think inevitably a lot of them are going to kind of go under,
unfortunately,
or evolve.
Yeah. Is there a is there a style that you've just always been wanting to jump into and wanting to try that you see for the future of Funkwerks?
Not really. I've done everything I wanted to do. I'm always kind of thinking of things, but there's no real one style that really sticks out that I would want to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always loved German Hefeweizen. If I was starting another brewery, I'd do a German Hefeweizen brewery probably.
Yeah.
As far as things here, I would say lower alcohol stuff. Over the last year, I've really been intrigued with low alcohol, non-alcohol. Like 5 years ago, I had Jester King's Petite Prince, 2.7% alcohol, Saison, fantastic beer. So I was really intrigued to try and do something like that. All the flavor of a regular beer, but you don't have to worry about getting into a car and driving after you have it.
Right. Yeah.
So
kind of the Belgian table beer type
exactly.
styles. Yeah. Yeah. Those have always been. I've always been fascinated by those as well. But I always have a plan. So for me, it's like if I'm going to drink beer, I want to feel it. But at the same time, those flavors that you can have without having to worry about it. That's awesome. So.
I mentioned this at the conference this past week to a friend of mine, and he goes, "Yeah, someone told me that non-alcohol beer is like listening to porn, and I'm like, yeah, I guess so. But if you want a beer, but you don't want to worry about the alcohol content, that might be a good way to go.
Yeah,
so I find myself, if I'm going to give a tour in the middle of the day, and I need to go back to work, I'll reach for the lowest ABV beer. So maybe we can come up with something that tastes like a regular 5 or 6% alcohol beer, but has very little alcohol.
Yeah.
So
it really tricked them.
Yeah, exactly.
It'd be like the guy that got high the first time in high school, and he thought he was high, but he really wasn't. You see him acting all goofy for no reason. This stuff is amazing.
Yeah.
If you what are some of the challenges with the Saison style and the style that you're brewing? What have been some of the biggest hurdles that you've had over the years?
Saison yeast are really difficult to kind of work with. Low flocculation. All of them are diastaticus, so it's going to break down dextrins. Early on, no one knew what diastaticus was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So yeah, I remember trying to I want to put more body in our beer, and trying to mash high and stuff, and no matter what, our yeast would just attenuate it like crazy. So I'm like, well, that didn't work. So yeah, learning how to deal with it, making sure we get beers to attenuate to the point where later on it's not going to keep carbonating, And I think that was the biggest problem for a lot of people trying to do saisons. It's if you don't let it get to the single digit on specific gravity, you really want it down to like no extract whatsoever.
Right.
You're asking for trouble. So,
how do if you had advice for homebrewers that were working with the yeast, on a smaller scale, what kind of advice do you have for them?
Time and temperature. It's difficult on a homebrew scale to really have the temperature control on fermentation that professional brewers have. But yeah, you want to kind of hold it warm, let that yeast do its thing, give it as much time as you can. And then, once you cold crash it, keep it cold. You don't want bottle bombs,
That's probably the worst feeling whenever you hear that that boom in the middle of the night, and you know what happened, but you just stay in bed and you don't get up. You're like, I'll just clean it up tomorrow. I've had it many times.
Yeah, I've never had it, but I was the home brewer that packaged everything in champagne bottles.
Oh, okay.
Being into Belgian beers and stuff, I had like tons of champagne bottles around.
Yeah.
So I've had where you pop the cap and the beer hits the ceiling before, for sure, but I never had an explosion.
That's good. You're lucky. You didn't have to keep your bottles in a bathtub for the first couple of weeks. So.
Got a lot of stuff coming up. Our saison de Brett's coming out soon. That's a foeder age saison that we do that has multiple strains of Brett and lactobacillus. Yeah, not a huge amount of new stuff going on.
Yeah. Just keep doing the same things that you've been doing. I think you'll be fine. I'm a fan, and I know everybody, like the guys I trade with are always curious. Like, yeah, I can get this, but what else is going on? So there's always questions out there.
Yeah. I guess one thing that's probably new is that we're going to start doing more of our sour blonde. Like I said, the Ode Bruin's taken, at least 8 years or more to kind of get to where it is.
Mm.
We started doing sour blonde about 3 years ago, and the idea is now we have enough barrels that we can blend that. So that's more of a lambic style. And there are probably going to be some releases of that, maybe straight up, maybe with fruit. We'll see where that goes.
Cool. Yeah, that one's one that I haven't got to try yet, but I've been curious about.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, our first two releases were Luminoso, but there's probably going to be other releases coming up. So
Awesome. Gordon, thanks for taking the time to chat with me today.
Sure, no problem.
Appreciate it. It's been great hearing the story and getting to know you a little bit. So
Thank you.